So people here struggle using an existing automation framework, and here we have a person who built an automation framework in her free time.
So I said, yeah, I can do that. And then started teaching my other teammates about how to start coding.
Today, the way I see BDD being done is it's being pigeonholed into, so if I use this tool, if I use this framework, if I use Cucumber, I'm doing BDD.
Do small, show value, then keep growing it bigger.
And something they are constantly telling me is they are slowly phasing out manual testing.
What? Never.
How important is to have diversity in your teams?
The culture we are brought up in, the thought processes we bring in from when we are diverse, those ideas get into our testing as well.
Welcome to yet another episode of Masters of the Craft. When we began this series, we promised you, together with the conversations that we have with our guests, we will be probing them and searching for the truth. Now, by truth, I don't mean the absolute truth of things, but contextual truth, organizational truth, and truth that might impact us as IT professionals. For this episode, we have a very, very interesting guest. Now, before beginning every episode, I keep saying that our guest is interesting because that's the truth. It is only guests who can add value to the audience that we try to invite onto the series. And today, we have none other than Mrs. Seema Prabhu, the head of QA at Hudl in UK. Now, Hudl is a very, very, very innovative and interesting company which is into the sports space. And Seema is doing very, very innovative and interesting things in the test space at Hudl. Since our guest has lots of information to share with us, we are going to do this in multiple segments. So, this would be the introductory segment where we speak to Seema on her career graph, being a women test leader, importance of automation, how can we implement testing and test automation the right way. So let's all be ready for a very interesting episode of Masters of the Craft. Namaste and vanakkam. Welcome everybody. Seema, it's great to have you on our show. You are quite a different person than the other guests that we have had on this show. And as we go along in this conversation, our audience will understand why I made the statement of you are totally different personality from the other two guests that we have had on our show. And that is why, with you, we have decided to do multiple episodes. And this is just one among the first inaugural episodes that we are going to do. So, Seema, let's start. You've had a very, very interesting career graph. uh, I think spanning almost 2 decades. And currently, you are the QA head at Hudl. So, tell us a little bit about how you started this journey, okay, and how has it been over the past 2 decades?
Thank you, JP. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast, and it's an honor to be part of your show. Interesting career, yeah, yes. Now that I look back upon it, I do. It is different, I would say, at least how I see it, and every step has been um, a great journey, something that I'll always take with me and remember me for different reasons. How did I start off with? I'm actually not from a computer science background. I come from a chemical engineering background. I studied in Bangalore. Then got into IT as a developer for some time, and then family took over. So family was the priority. I changed countries, and I realized I want to go back to work. I can't sit at home and do nothing. Um, Although it didn't feel like nothing, there was a lot to do. I had kids. Looking after the kids was a priority, but then going back to work was also. So since I'm a very driven person and I like reading books, so those things I think have kept me together throughout. So that's where I started off as a tester. Um, Luckily, I would say I've had amazing managers and mentors throughout my journey that actually changed the course of how I think and what I want to be doing. And probably that's where it made a difference.
So you were mentioning that you got this Java certification, and I know with from previous conversations with you that because of your background as a developer and you learning Java when you are preparing after your career break, in the first role that you were in, other than manual testing, you were the one who initiated automation out there, isn't it?
Hmm.
So what motivated you to do that? There can, was it because you seriously thought automation was adding value and you wanted to do it? Was it for the wow factor, or you wanted a higher standing because, you know what, I'm a tester who knows also how to code, and that has a higher, standing among the team? So what motivated you to go and do that? It's not something that normally people do. When we ask our so-called manual test engineers to say, go and automate, and they say no, that is something else. And here is a person long back just got back into the work stream, and then they said, okay, it was not even a management demand, if I understand this correctly. You went ahead and started automating, isn't it? So what motivated you to do that?
Right. This is I have to start off with long, long time ago, like a story. This was very long time ago. So we were in waterfall methodologies. So releases meant every 6 months, or once in 6 months to 8 months. And patches meant once a month, hotfix meant a week. So things like it was long duration during which testing would happen. So when I joined, as I started gaining experience, it became I can lead a hotfix or I can lead a patch release. Then I can lead a big release. So as I went through that, I knew the products, I knew how to do releases, how to lead various projects. And then it came to a point where I knew the product so well, I started getting bored. So I knew all the test cases in and out. So it would be like I would finish my job now. Then now what? Now what do I do? I need to do something more. So I would spend a lot of time because I know to read code and I'd done Java before and I knew how to read code as well. I would spend a lot of time talking to senior engineers and architects, trying to understand from their perspective what are they working on, what's coming up next, what should I get involved in, or can I get ready with something that's coming. So in that preparation, I would understand what is happening from a coding perspective, from what's happening behind the scenes as well, and not just do testing is my job, I will only look at running the tests manually and then that's my job done. So I didn't leave it at that point. And during this time, I think one of the senior engineers speaking to me said, You're so interested in coding and you like all this Java that we are building. Why don't you become a developer? I said, No, thank you. That's not what I want to become. I love being a tester and I want to do this, but is there something more I can do to help you or support you? At this point, he said, Have you thought about automation? I said, For what? And he told me, You take 6 months, we take 6 months for a release. We take a month or two for just running the manually executing tests. Why don't you automate it? I said, That's a great idea. And then because I knew Java at that point, I was a bit rusty because I hadn't actually used it in my day to day work. So I started trying different things and trying to see what I can do with it, started executing code. At some point, I even had some of my managers who used to sit behind me. It was an open office. So they would wonder what's a tester having a command prompt open on her screen? What's he doing with that? So that kind of conversation also happened, which is quite funny when at that point in time. And So I did a small POC of what I can do, of what I can probably do, and walked my thought process with the senior engineers. And he said, "This is great, but it needs to be better and bigger." So I said, "What is better and bigger?" And that's when he said, "Okay, let's get the architects as well." So the architects, the senior engineers, sat me down and they gave me a list of requirements. Basically, this was the start of an automation framework, saying we need to be able to automate the test that you're doing manually into code, so that the code tests true or false, assert if it's right or wrong. Then you should be able to run it via command prompt, and you should be able to run it on demand. You should be able to run click button, and then all the tests will run in sequence or they will run in parallel. So they gave me a list of requirements of what a framework should be. And they said, go do it. And this was not on any roadmap. This was just a side project I was doing in my free time, as you would call it. So started building that, had a set of tests. So we went from probably 2 months of a release, we reduced it by a week or two maximum. But again, it didn't seem much. That trust of I can run this automated test and not execute it was not there. So it was running the automated test and running it manually, and then seeing, am I getting the right answers? Is there something wrong with this? Can I fix this? Can I make it faster? Or how can I make it faster? How can I make it less flaky? It was more of trial and error at that point. At this point, it became visible to the management, saying, "Okay, she's been working on this. What is this actually being worked on?" Then they saw value in this, and that became, let's do this on a bigger scale. Why should one person only be doing this? Let's make this happen and reduce the release cycle to a shorter. And that's when the whole conversation started. We had an additional team come in who helped us speed up the automation and reduce the time for manually executing. And in the meantime, I had a whole team that was um, manually running all the tests. Every testing was manual until then. So I had this habit of teaching. I like teaching little bits and pieces of how this can be done, how interesting this is. And that excitement was always there. Oh my God, I can do this. Oh my God, look at this running. So the more I spoke about it, it became evident, saying, why don't you train the other team members? Said, oh, I can do that. So we started having small team meetings. I didn't have a role. I wasn't a manager. I wasn't in any big title. I was still a senior, not even a senior at that time, I think. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And then started teaching my other teammates about how to start coding, what Java is, and the OOPS principles, and started that. It was going slow though, because I was doing it as a part-time side thing. And that's when management saw that and they said, okay, let's give a proper Java course for the whole QA team. And that's how our journey started. After that, there was no looking back. We had mobile testing automation, we had web test automation, we had performance testers join in. So it just became bigger, better.
So people here struggle using an existing automation framework, and here we have a person who built an automation framework in her free time. That's like unbelievable, to say the least. And That brings us to a very interesting point in terms of automation should show value. We should not be automating for the sake of automation. What I see in this particular instance that you mentioned is the management started seeing value and they then decided to invest in automation
Mhm.
because they saw a tangible value. Many times what happens is it's the inverse that happens, where the management says we have to do automation because everybody else is doing automation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not really seeing the value. So, which is a better approach, where you impose automation top down, or bottom up, a little bit of value being created, and then they say, okay, let's take it further. Which, or is it contextual?
I would say it's contextual. It depends on uh, the context the organization is at that point in time. Are we ready for the change? Are we ready to invest? What is the experience in the team, and is there that that um, want to learn and change the way we are doing things or to improve? It's very contextual, but yeah, majority of the time that I've seen personally, I've seen value is when do small, show value, then keep growing it bigger. And that show value is, it can be a small thing. Maybe a release takes, maybe we are doing something manually and it takes 3 days. Shorten it to 1 day and show the value, and then say this can be applied. So it's more of it's not just showing I can do this. That's good. That's one part of it. It's then how do I apply it to the big picture for the organization, and what does it mean for the organization? I can say I'll build a automation framework. I can automate all these tests. All this is done. But what does it mean for that organization? What does it mean for business value? Are we achieving our goals faster, better? Does it improve quality? What is it? And if we can put that into words, I think it becomes much more tangible rather than, oh, we need to automate. Everyone's automating. Let's just do it. That doesn't go well. Then it's like, why am I spending on you?
So the metric that we should be considering is actually the value added, and each organization has to understand what is that value. It might be time, it might be in terms of resources, money, and not just follow blind matrices like percentage test cases automated, percentage test automation coverage, which might not be the best mechanism to look at, do we need automation, or how have we done our automation, right?
Yeah, yeah. And when we say percentage automation or automation coverage, what do we actually mean? Well, percentage of requirements, percentage of what's done, percentage of manual test cases. What if you didn't have manual test cases? Are you going to write manual test cases? Then are you going to make it redundant? A lot of questions come up. So it's good to have your basics clear. What value is this going to add to the business, not to me or to only my team? Or am I doing it because every other team seems to be doing it, so if I do it I'm as good as them? That won't make a difference.
Absolutely. So that brings me to another question. So I see that way back in 2013, you introduced BDD, or you worked with behavior driven development. Now, BDD, of course, if we really look at the history of why BDD came, there was a purpose, there is an intent. It originated from the test driven development principle, and a layer was added on top. But today, the way I see BDD being done is it's being pigeonholed into, so if I use this tool, if I use this framework, if I use Cucumber, I'm doing BDD. Okay.
Hmm.
So let me get to the root of this and ask you, according to you, what is the purpose of BDD? Is there a need for doing it? And does it work?
It does work. Again, it's contextual. BDD as a tool, if I'm using Gherkin, if I'm using Gherkin syntax, if I'm using a tool to write my test in this particular way and automate it, you're looking at a tiny speck of the whole thing. That's not at all going to solve your problem. It is
Where the
not going to
behavior
make
is
any
not driving the development, right? Because I'm doing
no,
it after the development is done.
correct. And again, not just after development is done, we're spending time in just maintaining it again based on what I understand or what my version of a test case should look like. And I'm making automation work with BDD because I want to use BDD. It's not BDD supporting what you want to be achieving in solving a problem. Now, what is the problem you're solving? It's to understand the behavior of the user and to make sure we are testing in that context, you're developing in that context, you're automating in that context. Now, if you don't even know what problem you're solving and just deciding, let me automate it using BDD framework, and it's write my test in given when then format, then you're writing a nice beautiful test with given when then format. It's readable to the whoever's reading it, but who's reading it? Often I find automation framework or automated test that we write, only the automated tester reads it. Most often we don't even talk about the test that we've written, we don't share our tests with engineers, we don't get everyone involved in that common language that we want to achieve. That defeats the whole purpose. So it works when you have product managers, engineers, testers all talking same language, looking for what is the behavior that drives in the product that we're building, and then write scenarios that matter most to the user. Then that is what is being built, tested, automated, everything else that goes on after that. So that makes a difference. Otherwise it's broken. And secondly, another one part I've seen, yes, we do I think most often BDD is used in automation context most often. And when we do that, it starts off nice where it's like Lego blocks. You're writing in blocks, then you're bringing together things and you're building a story out of it. That's great, that's nice. But what happens in the background technically is also something that is not visible straight away. Not everyone understands it when they're implementing. Is there's a lot of dependency and there's a lot of flakiness that gets introduced. And forget product managers or engineers, even within their own test team, who the ones who are writing these tests, if we are not on the same page of the language that we will use in writing these given, when, then, or the Gherkin syntax, it soon goes out of control. So I can have the same given as a user I do this, or given I am the user I do this, or given I as a some. So this that simple English then becomes really complicated with 10 scenarios talking the same thing, but you've implemented in 10 different ways. Now, that's where it becomes really important for behavior driven, meaning everyone comes together and talks the same language and has certain framework in place of what they're going to follow. Otherwise, we are just heading towards trouble.
I think nobody else could have put it so well, since you are hands on it, and I think you've seen the other end of failure of BDD also. So probably that's why you were able to bring in both perspectives. Fundamentally, I get pained many a times when I see teams implementing BDD. BDD, those syntaxes were supposed to be executable specifications, but what's the point in having an executable acceptance criteria? But when you write it for the sake of writing it and just write some automated test case out of it, then the whole purpose is defeated out there. So I think you put that beautifully out there. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, now I would say, in the space of software QA and testing, you're one of the few sane voices who prefers to use the term test engineer rather than just a tester.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we look at the definition, so you say testers are not just doing anything else, they're also software engineers who are doing tests. Now, an engineer is somebody who applies the principles that they know of, analyze, design, invent, and solve problems out there. So, what are test engineers solving? What are the real problems they're solving that they need to be called engineers? Are they just not validating things? Are they solving problems out there?
I think that this comes from, that's a good question. It comes from, we've evolved as testers over a period of time now. Yeah, there was a time when, like in waterfall time, or even just after that, where we Developer would develop, finish, we would validate what was had been done, we would do this manually, and that's all we were looking at. There was a time when it was like that. But as technologically we have evolved, the space has evolved, so have we as testers. So now we have a plethora of tools that we can use for a variety of things. The- Just even web testing. There's so many add-ons, tools that are available. You don't have to go searching variety of places. And we've also come reached a point where testers themselves are writing code to build the tools as well. So there's both aspects of it. We're using tools to be able to test better, to be able to test deeper, wider, and also building tools that will help us do that as well, where the tools are not available openly. Uh, because of these reasons, I think we're more into engineering as well. We're not just looking at it a product from that's the requirement, has it been tested. We're not leaving it at that point. We're going beyond that to understand how does it impact a user, what does it mean for a user, what does it mean to be scaling, how can we make this more reliable. We are into the engineering of building products as well, and not just being the end user anymore.
Great. I think your career started somewhere when the Y2K problem was the biggest problem in the IT industry, and it spanned so many years. You would have got a ringside view of how things are evolving, especially in the testing space. And you seem very optimistic, where you said we have now really moved on to the engineering role. It's no more about validation. I know that the organizations that you have worked in, you would have made teams come up to these roles, but you also meet a lot of other testers. You're a speaker, you are a mentor. So, looking at a holistic point of view, not just from your organization point of view, have things actually improved in the software QA space, or are they still the same?
there's there's two parts to this. There's one part where, yes, technically we've grown a lot. We've come a very long way. This is a very exciting space at this moment in time, where when we are that bridge between technology and business. We are that bridge between we have a voice, we have a seat at the table, we mean something. Quality has become important to a lot of people. So we are at that exciting stage in some areas. Then there are some areas where we still think testing is I test and I execute and I'm done, and I'm not being allowed to do this and I'm not being allowed to do that, and we're holding ourselves back. There's areas that we can grow as well, I think. But to your question, I think we're at a great time now that we can there's a lot we can achieve, but if we want to be doing it, and that's the question, are we ready to learn, to grow, to push the boundaries, and how much?
I will hook on to this point. You said yes, quality is now important. We do have a seat at the table, but who is this we? Is the definition, is the question. And let me come to some conversations that I've been having with engineering heads, product engineering heads, test engineering heads, etc. Especially from the product perspective of product organizations, product engineering organizations. And something they are constantly telling me is they are slowly phasing out manual testing. They're slowly pushing manual test validations towards the developers, and
Mm,
it is more in depth and automated, and other types of tests that is coming to the QA team. So they also now take quality very, very seriously. But in this shift left push, what's happened is a lot of the manual validations are shifting towards the developer, is what I've been hearing. And other day I was having a conversation with a client, and I was very surprised when we were getting into rate negotiations. uh, they were quoting exactly half for a manual tester compared to somebody who knows some bit of automation. So you are an influential person in this space. Let's speak the honest truth. Manual testers, test engineers are dead, right? Should we start building their final resting place?
No, not at all. I got asked this strangely enough yesterday night. I got a message from one of my team members, one of my really old friends, saying, "Is manual testing dead?" Out of random question. I was like, what? Never.
It could be
So
deja
I
vu for you
answered,
now.
seriously, yesterday night, out of nowhere, after a long many years time, that was the first question I got: is manual testing dead? And no, it's not. Let me say that. To your point, yes, testing has been shifting left. Yes, there's a lot of tests that engineering can do, that we can achieve technically, whether it's unit test or integration test or component test. We can push it as lower level as possible so that we can have a very limited end-to-end test, and that only that can be done manually. Yes, that is true. But as testers, we are not just writing the test as well. That unit test that gets written there too is something that we should be advocating for. That component test and integration test that gets written, doesn't matter who writes it, whether it's an automation engineer or a developer, it's for the business that we're doing. It needs to be written. The fact that it gets written is what I'm responsible for. I don't mind who writes it. That is one part of it. If you've heard that story, there's a plumber who gets called and um,
He
to
taps it.
repair taps, and then he taps at one and he says $1 for the nail and 19,000 is for to know where to do. That's what the manual tester becomes. The or we call manual tester, or the end-to-end tester. If you're looking at the pyramid, then the end-to-end testing, only if you know that all these tests that needs to be done has been captured somewhere in the unit test or integration test or in the component test or in the API test, and I need to focus only on this end-to-end test because everything else has been looked after. That's when I can do that short amount of test that is needed. If you don't know that, how are you going to say your manual tester doesn't know anything? It doesn't add up.
But are testers going and asking these questions? Are they even interested to know what component test has been done? Are they interested to know what integration test has been done? Because they think that's somebody else's duty.
That is where we need to invest our advocacy in, as leaders, as engineers, as people with experience, as managers. This is where we need to talk about. We talk a lot about testing is everyone's responsibility. Testing is not just the tester's job. We say all these things, but what does it actually mean in action? This is what it means. It doesn't matter who writes it as far as it's written. I'm care for the quality. I'm responsible for the quality, which means I need to identify what and where it needs to get tested and then ensure that it is tested by somebody or somehow. Now, who that is, it can be a tester who knows automation and is automating. It can be a developer who can support in automation, or it can be a manual tester because it cannot be automated. We have to do it manually, but maybe this person has the expertise in understanding what the user understands better, so that manual tester who doesn't know automation is also as effective and important for the organization for us to have that quality bar raised high. So you can't have one without the other. There have been organizations where they have removed manual testing completely, or I don't need testers. Engineers will do it. Let engineers manage. We will train them. We will certify them in ICE, TQB, ICE, whatever the certification things are. Let them train and they will write the test. It has worked short term. Again, it's contextual. If it's a purely technical organization where they only build tools or technology, then probably it's still okay. But if it is user facing and something that's used by end users, then it becomes difficult. Then you need a user perspective. You need to understand it's not just the code that you're testing what's the validation side of it as well. What does it mean, or what impact does this have on the user? So I don't think you can just remove that. I've seen it in cycles. We don't want any testers, engineers will do it, and then they realize, okay, the number of problems are increasing, then let's just add somebody. Oh, this one person's not enough, let's grow this team. Oh, we need testers now. So it goes in cycles, on and off. But what I find is we need to show value in what we are doing. If we sit and say, I'm only responsible for testing that, which means executing the test or automating the test cases, then that is what we will limit ourselves to. Then we can call it RIP. That's individual. I won't say it's common.
Actually, I know of a investment bank which recently took the same call that you're talking about. We will train our developers, we will train them on testing, we'll get them certified, and they've just started that journey. And I'm sure, because since they are a user-facing organization, I'm sure this cycle that you talked about is going to come back, and they're going to say, okay, let's take one person to do, and then it'll become another team. Wonderful. So it gives hope for people who are ready to do things beyond just the validation function out there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come to another question. There's a lot of talk these days on diversity, equality, inclusion, etc., and I too believe in that. Uh, that equality and diversity is important. But from a test leader's point of view, how important is to have diversity in your teams?
I would say it's really, really important because then you want to eliminate biases in testing, which is really important. The culture we are brought up in, how we grow, the context we bring in, the thought processes we bring in from when we are diverse, those ideas get into our testing as well. And that's when it starts to add more value. If we don't need to be diverse, we might as well have just automation which says true or false. That's it. You don't need to think a lot.
That's why I asked this question. Because I have seen homogeneous teams, and that bias, once it comes in, you would see a lot of scenarios being missed out, because they say, okay, we know how this works, and they don't think of something else. And that can be killer, especially when you're doing testing, because you need different points of view. And that's why I asked this question.
Yeah.
Interesting.
One example I can say it's about the diversity. So I came into this country. I'm from India. So I came into UK. There are certain things about British culture which I didn't know, or how things work here is something I didn't know when I started working. I didn't know too much about. Let me put it that way. So in one of my jobs when I was testing, um, we were looking at family structures, and in that while testing that, my thinking was purely based on how Indian families work. I tested it in that way, and I went away on holiday. And while on holiday, I was watching news, and something came up on the news that triggered my thought saying, oh, this happens here. I never knew about that because in India we don't see such things. I was like, oh my god, I never thought about this. And then when I came back to work, the first thing I did was go back and see how does that work in the software, because that's a scenario I'd never thought about. I wasn't aware about it. So yeah, culture makes a difference too. And again, diversity comes in various forms. So it's one of them.
Absolutely. So you are a leader, you are a mentor, you are a speaker. You play so many roles out there. My question is, where do you find the time for it? Is work life balance something that really exists, or is that something that you have to consciously build in?
I think post COVID, I've given up on the word work life balance. I call it you just have to balance your life in some way of doing different things. Previous to the pandemic, yes, work life balance was super important for me. Have kids and spending time with them is important. They are the next generation, and work will keep going on. Role, title, job, they will come and go, but I only have one chance to bring up those children. That's why that was super important for me. There was no question of what is more important. It was they come first, the kids come first, family comes first, health comes first. There was no second thoughts about that. So that was a clear line I had drawn previously, and I didn't get into anything. But I guess it also gave me the time to build up on a lot of other things that could become handy as I grew in my career, whether it was about reading things or learning something new or various things that I was doing at that point supported me in the journey now when I'm a leader or I need to know or do certain things, and I am prepared for it. So the time that I had, I hadn't wasted it, and I have no regrets for what I did earlier. um, so that conscious being clear was very important for me. But today, post pandemic, like you said, it's now only now that I've started in recent times being a coach, a mentor, talking in conferences, um, in addition to work and everything else. That I have to find the right balance. There have been times when I've put myself like being the ever. I want to do everything in life. I want to have an experience of everything. I put myself, and I've learned that if I do that, all I'll do is everything that I've learned. I can talk about it up to. So the growth will be a year, 2 years. You can come up with whatever you've learned all these years. Then, if you don't keep growing, you're just stagnant there. And that's even worse because now you know what you can do, but you're not able to because you're just dragged in different corners. So I realized that probably a year after I started doing all these things. Initially, I started doing everything. And then I have consciously learned to find the right balance between work, coaching, mentoring, learning, conference talking, or whatever the other extra that I would like to be doing. It's to find the right cadence and wherein the priority it is for you in life. Finding that balance was really important for me. I think that was a real turner.
Super. Seema, it has been wonderful having you on our show. And our audience would have seen that you're a gold mine of information, especially on the testing space. We are going to have you share more such gems of wisdom with us. We'll have further episodes where we have a lot to talk about agile, about the future of test engineering, especially with generative AI and all coming in. And I would make a request to our audience also to do leave their comments on what are the questions that we should be asking Seema Prabhu in the upcoming episodes. So, Seema, thanks a lot for being on Masters of the Craft. You do justice to the title of the podcast, Masters of the Craft. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you, JP. Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you. So it's
Thank
a pleasure talking.
thank you.